My name is Sebastian. I'm 19 years old, and this is the story of how my curiosity for the forbidden nearly cost me my life. It's a tale about the darkest depths of the internet, where humanity reveals its most sinister face, and where a naive young person can become the target of predators lurking in the digital shadows. It was a Friday night, and as usual, my classmates had gone out to clubs while I stayed in my apartment studying. I've always been the introverted type, more comfortable with computers than with people. I was browsing programming forums when I stumbled upon a conversation about the deep web. I'd heard about it before. This part of the internet that doesn't show up on regular search engines, where you could supposedly find anything: drugs, weapons, classified documents, and far worse things. Curiosity got the better of me. As a systems engineering student, I had enough technical knowledge to navigate relatively safely, or so I thought. I downloaded Tor, set up a VPN, and took all the precautions I'd read about in forums. My first venture was cautious. I visited some drug markets, without buying anything, just observing, hacker forums, and sites with conspiratorial information. It was both fascinating and terrifying. A completely parallel world where society's normal rules didn't apply. It was on my third night of exploring when I found the forum that would change my life forever. It was called The Last Resort. The Last Resort wasn't like the other sites I'd visited. It didn't sell drugs or pornography. It was different, more sinister. The main page was simple: black background, neon green text, and an unsettling message. For those who have no other options. For those who need problems to disappear. Permanently. It was obvious what it was about, but morbidly fascinating. The forum was divided into sections: available services, testimonials, private inquiries, and something called the market of endings. The available services were exactly what you'd expect: different types of eliminations. There were categories by price, method, and geographic location. Prices ranged from $5,000 for simple accidents to $50,000 for complex operations with staging. The most disturbing part was the testimonials, seemingly real messages from satisfied clients describing how they'd resolved their problems through the forum. A businessman who had eliminated a competitor, a woman who had gotten rid of an abusive husband, a student who had solved a professor who was failing them. I knew I should have closed the site immediately. It was horrific, immoral, and probably part of some undercover police operation. But I couldn't look away. It was like watching a car accident. Repulsive, but hypnotic. And then I saw it. A message in the public chat directed at me. "Hey newbie. I see you've been connected for a while but haven't said anything. Just browsing." The user was called Cleaner. My first instinct was to close the browser immediately. Someone had noticed me, and that couldn't be good. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe youthful arrogance, but I responded. "Just looking. Didn't know you could see who was connected. We always know who's here, especially newbies. Where are you from?" "Argentina. Buenos Aires. A porteño. Haven't had contact with someone from there in a while. Student." The question made me nervous. How could they know that? "How do you know I'm a student?" "Your connection time. Only university students browse these sites at 2 a.m. on a Friday. Adults with real jobs are sleeping or with their families." They were right, and that unnerved me more. "And what are you doing up at this hour?" "Night work. My profession requires discretion. Night hours are better for certain activities." No clarification was needed about what kind of activities. "Are you really—" I couldn't finish the question. "A hitman?" "Yes. Though I prefer the term problem solver. Sounds more professional." The chat went silent for several minutes. I didn't know how to respond. "You got nervous," Cleaner continued. "That's fine. A normal reaction. Want to know what this job is really like?" I knew I should have said no, but instead I wrote, "Yes." For the next 2 hours, Cleaner told me stories about their work. At first, I thought they were fabrications, stories made up to impress or scare a curious newbie. But there were specific details, technical knowledge, and a casual coldness that made them sound terrifyingly real. They told me about an accountant in Rosario who had been stealing money from a client's family business. Looked like a car accident, they wrote. Faulty brakes on a mountain road. No one suspected a thing. They described eliminating a journalist in Cordoba investigating local corruption. Suicide, they explained. Depression from work issues. I'd planted evidence of their deteriorating mental state for months. The most disturbing story was about a judge in Mendoza blocking certain business operations. That one was more creative, they wrote. Home invasion gone wrong. 3 shots, stole some valuables to make it look authentic. The police never found the thieves. Why are you telling me all this? I asked finally. Because you're different. Most curious people who come here are looking for weird porn or drugs. You're genuinely interested in understanding how this world works. And you think that's a good thing. I think it's refreshing. I've been doing this job for 5 years, and I rarely meet someone who can appreciate the craftsmanship involved. Craftsmanship. They talked about murder like it was carpentry. Don't you ever feel guilty? I asked. Guilty for what? For eliminating corrupt, abusive, or problematic people. I'm like an urban cleanup service. I remove the trash society can't process through normal channels. There was a twisted logic in their reasoning that disturbed me more than any graphic description. How did you get into this? That's a story for another day. It's late, and I'm guessing you have classes tomorrow. They were right. It was Friday, and I had classes on Saturday morning. You coming back? They asked. I don't know. I lied. I already knew I would. I'm here most nights. Ask for cleaner. And Sebastian, don't tell anyone about this place. My blood ran cold. How did they know my real name? How? But they had already disconnected. I couldn't sleep that night. How had Cleaner known my name? I'd used Tor with a VPN, taken every precaution I knew, but clearly it wasn't enough. I spent the weekend frantically researching deep web security, anonymity techniques, and ways someone could have obtained my personal information. What I found scared me even more. There were dozens of ways an expert could have identified me, from analyzing writing patterns to correlating connection times with local university databases. If Cleaner was truly a professional, they'd have access to resources and knowledge I couldn't even imagine. On Monday morning, during my networks class, I discreetly asked the professor about online anonymity. Professor, is it really possible to stay completely anonymous online? That's an excellent question, Professor Garcia replied. The short answer is no, not completely. There are always digital footprints, and with enough resources and time, anyone can be tracked. But what about Tor and VPNs? They're useful tools for basic privacy, but against a sophisticated adversary with significant resources. Well, let's just say the NSA doesn't use Tor to protect its secrets. The conversation didn't reassure me at all. Despite my fears, or perhaps because of them, I returned to the forum on Tuesday night. Cleaner was waiting for me. Knew you'd come back. Curiosity is a powerful force. How did you know my name? I asked directly. Sebastian Molina, 19 years old, first-year systems engineering student at UBA. You live alone in an apartment in Villa Crespo that your parents rent for you. Your dad's a civil engineer. Your mom's a teacher. Should I go on? My heart stopped. They knew too much. How did you get that information? It's my job to know things about people. And you're not as anonymous as you think. Are you threatening me? Not at all. If I wanted to threaten you, you'd already know exactly where you live, that your bedroom window faces the inner courtyard, and that you have a bad habit of not closing the curtains at night. I immediately ran to my window and yanked the curtain shut. When I returned to the computer, another message was waiting. Sorry. Couldn't resist. I'm not physically watching you, Sebastian. That info came from digital sources. But you could. Watch you? Of course. But there's no reason to. I like you. You're smart, curious, and not a moral idiot like most of my clients. What does that mean? My clients are usually scum. People who want to eliminate others for greed, personal revenge, or power. You're here out of genuine intellectual curiosity. That's unusual, and that makes me special somehow. It makes you more interesting to talk to. For the next hour, Cleaner told me more about their work, this time with more technical details. They explained how they researched targets, planned accidents, and avoided police investigations. It was fascinating in a twisted way, like studying an artist's work, except their art was death. Aren't you ever worried about getting caught? I asked. Always. Paranoia keeps me alive and free. That's why I change identities every few years. Why I never work in the same city twice in a row. Why I use multiple layers of digital anonymity. How many people have you killed? Officially none. Officially, I'm a security consultant who travels a lot for work. Unofficially, well, I've solved 23 problems in the last 5 years. 23 people, 23 families destroyed, 23 lives ended for money. Have you ever done a job here in Buenos Aires? Once, 2 years ago. A local politician causing problems for certain people. But I prefer not to work where I live. Where do you live? That information is above your clearance level, they replied, and I could imagine the sinister smile behind the screen. The conversation was interrupted by a form notification. A new user had joined the chat. Desperate Client 2024. Sorry, Sebastian. Got work to attend to. But we'll keep chatting tomorrow. I watched the conversation between Cleaner and the new client with morbid fascination. Hi, wrote Desperate Client 2024. I need help with a problem. Tell me about your problem, Cleaner replied, their tone shifting to something more professional. It's my ex-husband. He's getting custody of my daughter, and I can't allow that. He's abusive, violent, but the legal system is on his side. Location: Mar del Plata. Budget: I have $15,000 saved. That's enough for a basic accident. Timeline: as soon as possible. The custody hearing is in 2 weeks. Perfect. I'll move you to a private chat. And just like that, in a matter of minutes, I'd witnessed the arrangement of a murder. It was surreal, like watching a normal business transaction, except the product was death. I stayed in the chat for another hour, but no one else appeared. Finally, I disconnected, but the conversations I'd overheard haunted me all night. The next day, Cleaner contacted me as soon as I logged in. What did you think of last night's conversation? Disturbing, but fascinating. Yes, I admitted reluctantly. Thought so. I have a proposal for you. My stomach tightened. What kind of proposal? Nothing illegal, relax. At least not directly. I need someone with technical skills for some administrative tasks. What kind of tasks? Digital research, gathering information on targets, social media analysis, movement patterns, daily routines, the kind of stuff a systems student could do from their computer. Are you asking me to help you kill people? I'm asking you to help me research people. What happens after? Well, that's my responsibility. It's the same thing. Is it? Is a detective who investigates a suspect complicit if that suspect ends up in jail? That's different. Is it? Both are jobs. Both involve the gathering information on people who will be processed by someone else. The logic was twisted, but not entirely nonsensical. How much would you pay? $2,000 per research job. You could do one a month without it affecting your studies. $2,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen at once. With that, I could pay for university, help my parents with expenses, maybe even move to a better apartment. And if I say no, then we stay chat buddies and talk about life. No pressure, Sebastian. But it'd be a waste of your talent. I need to think about it. Of course. But don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't come often. I couldn't focus on studying that night. $2,000 for research. It was tempting, especially since technically I wouldn't be the one hurting anyone. The next day, Cleaner contacted me again. I've got a different proposal. A free trial. What kind of trial? There's someone I'm interested in researching, but it's not a paid job. It's, let's say, personal interest. If you help me with this research, I'll give you $500 as a show of good faith. If you like the work, we continue. If not, no harm done. Who is it? A professor at UBA. His name's Raul Garcia. Teaches at the engineering faculty. My blood ran cold. It was my professor, the same one who had talked to me about online anonymity. Why are you interested in him? Let's say he's been poking his nose where it doesn't belong. Asking questions about certain online activities. Questions about you. Potentially, I need to know if he's a threat or just a curious academic. This was getting too real, too personal. And if I don't want to, then forget the offer and we stay chat buddies. But Sebastian, your professor is already on my radar. With or without your help, I'm going to investigate him. The difference is, with your help, you can ensure the investigation is limited. The implied threat was clear. If I didn't help, Professor Garcia might end up being more than just investigated. Fine, I wrote finally. What do you need to know? Over the next few days, I gathered information on Professor Garcia. His address, available in the university directory. His car, I saw it in the faculty parking lot. His class schedule, his daily movement patterns. I also researched his personal life. He was married, had 2 young children, lived in a house in San Isidro. His social media showed a normal life. Family photos, updates about his classes, academic articles. But the more I researched, the more uncomfortable I felt. Professor Garcia was a good person. His students respected him, his colleagues spoke highly of him, and his cybersecurity research was aimed at protecting people, not hurting anyone. I passed all the information to Cleaner, but included a note. This guy isn't a threat to anyone. He's just a professor doing his job. Interesting, Cleaner replied. His research patterns suggest he's following specific leads. Someone gave him information about certain activities. What kind of information? The kind that could lead to police investigations. But you're right. He doesn't seem like an immediate threat. Thanks for the work. The next day, I found $500 in Bitcoin in a digital wallet that had appeared on my computer. I didn't even know how it got there. How did you do that? I asked. I have many talents, they replied, ready for a real job. The first real job was to investigate a businessman from Cordoba named Ricardo Vega. According to Cleaner, Vega was causing problems for certain business interests and needed to be dissuaded from continuing his activities. What kind of problems? I asked. He's blocking certain real estate developments. Some investors need him to step aside. And you're going to kill him for that? Only if it can't be resolved another way. Sometimes a threat is enough. Other times, well, investigating Vega took 2 weeks. It was more complex than Professor Garcia's case because I had to do it remotely. I used social engineering techniques, social media analysis, and searches in public databases. I uncovered his daily routines, security vulnerabilities, his family's schedules, even the access code to his house. He'd used it on multiple online accounts with slight variations. But I also discovered something else. Vega wasn't a corporate villain. He was a legitimate environmental activist trying to protect a local wetland from corrupt developers. He was in the right. When I handed the information to Cleaner, I included another note. This guy is doing the right thing. The real villains are the ones who want to kill him. That's not our call, Cleaner replied. Our job is to provide information. What the client does with it is their responsibility. But you're going to kill him. Probably. And that doesn't bother you. Sebastian, I've killed corrupt politicians, honest businessmen, activists, criminals, and regular citizens. Morality is a luxury I can't afford in this job. I received $2,000 that night. It was the largest amount of money I'd ever had, but it felt like dirty money. Like money stained with future blood. Over the next few weeks, Cleaner gave me more jobs. Each paid $2,000, and each became more personal, more specific. I investigated a journalist writing about police corruption, a judge blocking certain operations, an accountant who had uncovered financial irregularities. In each case, the targets were decent people trying to do the right thing, and in each case, I was providing the information that would be used to eliminate them. But the money kept coming. $10,000 in total, more money than my parents saw in 6 months. And then Cleaner gave me the job that would change everything. This one's special, they said, worth $5,000. Who is it? A federal police detective. His name's Inspector Morales. He's investigating certain online activities. The name sounded familiar. I'd seen articles about him in the news. He was a cybercrime specialist. What's he investigating? He's investigating us. Me, the forum, the whole operation. And he's close to making connections that could be problematic. How close? Close enough that he needs to be eliminated before he can cause trouble. This was different. The other jobs had been about corruption or business conflicts. This was directly about protecting the criminal operation I was now part of. And if I say no, then I get the information elsewhere. But Sebastian, this detective won't stop. If you stay involved with us, he'll eventually investigate you too. The threat was clear. Either I helped eliminate the detective, or the detective would eventually find me. I need to think about it. There's not much time to think. I need the information in 48 hours. I didn't sleep at all that night. I'd gotten in too deep. What had started as morbid curiosity had turned into direct participation in multiple murders. And now, they wanted me to help kill a police officer. A police officer trying to stop the exact kind of operation I'd gotten involved in. But I also knew that if I didn't do it, I'd likely become a target myself. Cleaner knew where I lived, where I studied, everything about my life. And they'd shown they were perfectly capable of eliminating threats. I had 3 options: help kill the detective, flee the country, or something else. I chose the third option. Instead of investigating Inspector Morales for Cleaner, I investigated him for myself. I found his official contact information and sent an anonymous message through a temporary email account. Inspector Morales, I have information about the criminal network you're investigating. I'm an informant and in danger. Can we meet in person? The response came in 6 hours. Yes. When and where? We agreed to meet the next day at a downtown cafe, in broad daylight, and in a public place. Inspector Morales was a man in his mid-40s, medium build, with eyes that seemed to have seen too many terrible things. When I sat down across from him at the cafe, I immediately knew I'd made the right choice. "Are you the one who contacted me?" he asked. "Yes. I have information about a hitman network operating through the deep web." I told him everything, from my first connection to the forum to the latest job they'd asked me to do. I showed him screenshots of the conversations, details of the research jobs I'd done, and all the information I'd gathered about the targets. Morales listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. "Do you know the real names of any of these people?" he asked finally. "No. I only know Cleaner by their pseudonym, but I have information on their methods, communication patterns, and details of several jobs." "And you're willing to testify about all this?" "Yes, but Inspector, Cleaner knows where I live. They know everything about my life. If they find out I betrayed them, we'll protect you, but I need you to do one more thing." "What?" "I need you to stay in contact with them. Act normal. Give them the information on me they asked for, but modified. False information that lets us control them. You're asking me to be a double agent." I'm asking you to help us stop a serial killer who's murdered at least 23 people. For the next week, I played my part. I passed cleaner false information about Inspector Morales, incorrect routines, fake addresses, invented vulnerabilities. Excellent work, Cleaner wrote after reviewing the information. This detective will be easier to eliminate than I thought. Meanwhile, I worked with Morales and a team of cybercrime specialists to track Cleaner's real identity and the forum's server locations. It was terrifying to keep up the facade. Every conversation with Cleaner could be my last if they realized I'd betrayed them. "When's it going to happen?" I asked one night. "Tomorrow night. It's all planned. It'll look like a robbery gone wrong. Do you need anything else from me?" "No. You've done an excellent job, Sebastian. After tomorrow, you can take a vacation. You've earned it." I immediately passed the information to Morales. The trap was set. The next night, instead of the real Inspector Morales, an undercover agent waited at the fake address I'd provided. The apartment was surrounded by SWAT teams, and every move was being monitored. From my computer, I could follow the police team's communications in real time. Morales had given me access so I could see how the operation unfolded. At 10:30, they reported movement. Someone was approaching the building. At 10:45, they confirmed entry. The subject had entered the building using professional lockpicking techniques. At 11, they had him. The man I knew as Cleaner was arrested while trying to break into the supposed Inspector Morales' apartment. But the real shock came when they processed his identity. The man behind the pseudonym Cleaner was Dr. Miguel Hernandez, a former surgeon, 38 years old, who had lost his medical license 3 years earlier due to malpractice. He'd used his medical knowledge to perfect murder methods that looked like accidents or natural causes. Even more shocking, he'd been operating from Buenos Aires the whole time. He lived just 6 blocks from my apartment. "He's been in the city for all these jobs," Morales explained when we met after the arrest. "He was probably watching you physically from the start. The idea that he'd been so close, that he might have seen me in person without my knowing, made me feel sick." During the search of his apartment, the police found evidence of 31 murders, not 23, as he'd admitted. They also found detailed files on me, photos taken from the street, my class schedules, information about my parents, even recordings of phone conversations. He'd been planning something more than just using me for research. In Hernandez's computer, the police found folders dedicated to each of his victims, including those I'd researched. But they also found something more disturbing: a folder with my name. Morales showed me the contents during one of our follow-up meetings. "This is what he had planned for you," he said, opening a series of documents. The files detailed a plan to permanently recruit Sebastian M. for more extensive operations. It included methods to blackmail me, using evidence of my involvement in the research, techniques to isolate me from my family and friends, and ultimately plans to relocate me to another city where I'd work exclusively for him. "It was a grooming process," Morales explained. "He was psychologically preparing you to depend entirely on him. The final plan, according to the documents, was to fake my death and give me a new identity, effectively turning me into his property. And if I hadn't cooperated," Morales pointed to another section of the files, "there were photos of my parents entering and leaving their house, information about their commuting routes, and what were clearly plans to use them as leverage against me. He wouldn't have given you a choice." Miguel Hernandez's trial was one of the largest cybercrime cases in Argentina's history. The media covered it extensively, though my identity was protected as a minor informant. Hernandez pleaded guilty to 31 counts of first-degree murder, plus multiple charges related to cybercrime, blackmail, and conspiracy. During his testimony, he revealed details about the broader network he was part of. The Last Resort wasn't just a form, it was part of an international organization facilitating contract crimes across multiple deep web platforms. My testimony was crucial in establishing how the organization operated and how they recruited unwilling accomplices. The defendant specialized in manipulating young people with technical skills, I stated from a closed room, my voice distorted to protect my identity. He used a combination of money, psychological blackmail, and implied threats to turn curiosity into complicity. Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The months after the trial were tough. Though my identity was protected publicly, I had to live with the knowledge of what I'd done. I'd provided information that had led to the deaths of at least 6 innocent people. Therapy helped, but the nightmares persisted for months. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of the victims I'd researched: the environmentalist businessman, the anti-corruption journalist, the honest judge. "You weren't responsible for what he did with the information," my therapist kept telling me. "You were a victim of manipulation and grooming." But the guilt was hard to shake. When I returned to university the next semester, everything felt different. My classmates talked about ethical hacking and cybersecurity as theoretical concepts, but I'd seen the darkest applications of those skills. Professor Garcia, whose life I'd indirectly saved by diverting cleaners' attention, gave me extra support without knowing exactly why. Morales had vaguely explained to him that I'd been involved in a national security investigation, but not the details. "Sebastian," he told me after a class, "I don't know exactly what happened last year, but I hope you know that technical skills can be used to protect people, not just to hurt them." "I know, Professor. And I'm going to make sure I use mine the right way." The experience completely changed my academic path. Instead of focusing on general programming, I specialized in cybersecurity and digital crime. I wanted to use my skills to prevent other young people from falling into the same traps I had. I started volunteering with organizations that educated about the dangers of the deep web and helped victims of online grooming. The deep web isn't inherently evil, I explained to groups of high school students during prevention talks, but it's a place where predators can operate with relative impunity, and they specialize in identifying and exploiting youthful curiosity. It's been 2 years since my first connection to the last resort. The broader network is still being investigated by international authorities, and my testimony has been used in at least 12 related cases. Miguel Hernandez is in a maximum security prison where he'll remain for the rest of his life. According to prison reports, he's been threatened multiple times by other inmates who discovered the nature of his crimes. The money I earned working for him, more than $15,000 in total, was donated to organizations helping families of violent crime victims. I couldn't keep it, knowing where it came from. People often ask me what would have been different if I'd made different choices that first night. What if I'd closed the browser when I saw the last resort? What if I'd ignored Cleaner's first message? What if I'd reported everything immediately instead of letting curiosity drag me deeper? The truth is, I don't know. Maybe Miguel Hernandez would have found another victim to manipulate. Maybe he would have kept killing for years undetected. Or maybe he would have been caught another way. What I do know is that curiosity, without clear ethical boundaries, can be destructive, and that the perceived anonymity of the internet can blur moral lines very quickly. The deep web still exists. Forums like The Last Resort still operate under different names, and curious young people still find these sites every night. My story is a warning. When you're navigating the depths of the internet, remember that the depths are watching you too. And some things you find down there can drag you into an abyss that's very hard to escape. If you're a curious young person reading this, my advice is simple: stay on the surface. There are enough wonders and horrors in the visible internet to satisfy any curiosity. Don't search in places where monsters roam freely. Because unlike the monsters in movies, these monsters are real, and they're looking for their next victim. The internet is like the ocean, beautiful on the surface, but full of predators in the depths. and once it pulls you under, it can be impossible to come back up for air. I learned that lesson the hard way. I hope you never have to learn it at all. My name is Lucas. I'm 18 years old, and this is the story of how my fascination with the darkest corners of the internet nearly destroyed my mind and my life. It's a warning about what lurks in the digital depths, where humanity explores its most destructive impulses, and where curiosity can become a deadly trap. It all began during the winter break of my final year of high school. My parents had traveled to Europe for their wedding anniversary, leaving me alone at home for 3 weeks. It was July of 2023, and Buenos Aires was steeped in that damp cold that seeps into your bones. I've always been the kind of guy who preferred computers to people. While my classmates went out to clubs or hung out in parks, I stayed in my room exploring the internet, learning to code, and feeding my insatiable curiosity for technology. It was during a particularly boring night, after I'd exhausted all my usual websites, that I decided to venture into uncharted territory. I'd read about the deep web in hacker forums, but had never had the courage or the stupidity to explore it for real. I downloaded Tor, set up a VPN, and followed every security guide I could find. I thought I was being cautious. I had no idea I was opening a door I wouldn't be able to close. My first foray was timid. Drug markets that didn't interest me, conspiracy forums that seemed ridiculous, and sites with leaked documents that were more boring than revealing. After 2 hours, I was ready to give up and go back to YouTube. But then I found a link that changed everything. Mind Project, Experiments in Human Consciousness. The site was unlike anything I'd seen on the deep web. Instead of the typical amateur design of green text on a black background, it had a professional, almost academic interface. It looked like a legitimate university website. The main page explained that the Mind Project was advanced psychological research into the limits of human consciousness, led by Dr. Marcus Weber, Ph.D. in experimental neuropsychology from a university I didn't recognize. We seek volunteers willing to participate in groundbreaking experiments exploring the boundaries of perception, memory, and subjective reality, the description read. Participants will receive monetary compensation and access to experiences that expand consciousness beyond conventional limits. What hooked me wasn't the promise of money, but the claim that they were redefining what it means to be human in the digital age. As an aspiring computer science student, the intersection of technology and consciousness fascinated me. There was a section on current experiments, listing several ongoing studies: extreme digital immersion, 72 hours in continuous virtual reality, technological sensory deprivation, isolation in controlled environments, memory manipulation, techniques for implantation and erasure, consciousness transfer, experiments with brain-computer interfaces. Each experiment had a detailed description that sounded scientifically legitimate, but also vaguely unsettling. At the bottom of the page was a button. Apply to participate. I should have walked away. I should have closed the browser immediately, but scientific curiosity and teenage arrogance betrayed me. I clicked. The application form was exhaustive, far more detailed than any survey I'd ever completed. It started with basic information: name, age, location, medical history. But then it got more invasive. Describe your relationship with digital technology. How many hours a day do you spend online? Have you ever experimented with consciousness-altering substances? How resilient do you consider your mind to external influence? Do you have family or friends who would notice if you disappeared for several days? That last question should have been an immediate red flag, but in my youthful arrogance, I thought it was just academic caution. The questions got stranger. Have you ever felt that your memories aren't entirely your own? How willing would you be to question your perception of reality? Have you ever experienced episodes of lost time or dissociation? I answered everything honestly, including the fact that I was temporarily living alone and that no one would be looking for me for several weeks. At the end of the form, there was a series of psychological tests, personality assessments, mental stability evaluations, and something called the Neural Susceptibility Index, which involved staring at geometric patterns on the screen while answering questions about what I saw. I submitted the application around 2 a.m., expecting maybe an automated response or never hearing back. I got a reply in 20 minutes. "Congratulations, Lucas. Your psychological profile is exactly what we're looking for in our next experiment." The email was signed by Dr. Weber and included a disturbingly accurate analysis of my responses. "You demonstrate high technical intelligence combined with exploratory curiosity and limited resistance to authoritative influence. Your temporary social and familial isolation makes you an ideal candidate for our complete digital immersion study." How had they analyzed so much for my responses so quickly? "The experiment will last 5 days and pay you $2,000, the email continued. "All you need to do is remain in your current home and follow the instructions we'll send you daily. There is no physical risk, and you can withdraw at any time. $2,000 for staying home and following instructions." It seemed too good to be true. If you're interested, reply to this email with the word "accept," and you'll receive day 1 instructions tomorrow morning. I stared at the email for several minutes. Every instinct told me something was wrong. But $2,000 was more money than I'd ever seen at once, and curiosity gnawed at me. I typed ACCEPT and hit send. I went to bed wondering what I'd gotten myself into. I woke at 9 a.m. to an email waiting for me. Day 1, digital isolation phase. Instructions: disconnect all internet devices except your primary computer. Cover all windows in your home with opaque material. Do not leave the house for any reason for the next 100 to 20 hours. Consume only the food currently in your home. Keep artificial lighting minimal, only 1 lamp per room. Report every 4 hours by sending an email with the subject "status" and a description of your mental state. Log in to the portal linked at the bottom of this message to access experiment-specific content. At the bottom was a link to a website requiring login credentials included in the email. The instructions seemed odd but harmless. It was basically voluntary isolation for a few days. Thousands of people did stricter quarantines for medical reasons. I followed the instructions meticulously. I disconnected the PS4, my phone, my tablet. I hung blankets over the windows, creating perpetual dimness throughout the house. I inventoried the food. I had enough for several days if I rationed carefully. Then I accessed the experiment portal. The portal was unsettling from the moment it loaded. The screen was completely black except for a circle of light in the center that pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Below the circle was simple text: "Observe the pattern. Let your mind relax. Report any changes in perception." I stared at the pulsing circle for a few minutes. At first, nothing happened. But gradually, I noticed something strange. The pulse seemed to sync with my own heartbeat. And with each pulse, I heard a faint sound like a distant whisper. After half an hour, the pattern changed. The circle fragmented into multiple geometric shapes, moving hypnotically. The whispers grew clearer, but I still couldn't make out what they were saying. I followed the instructions to report every 4 hours. Hour 4. The visual pattern is hypnotic. I hear subtle sounds that might be suggestive. I feel slightly disoriented but not alarmed. The response came immediately. "Excellent. You're responding as expected. Continue observing." The real experiment is about to begin. On the second day, the patterns on the portal grew more complex. It was no longer just a pulsing circle, but intricate fractals, expanding and contracting in dimensions my mind struggled to process. And the whispers became clearer. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but gradually I started distinguishing words. Simple phrases repeated subliminally. Your reality is constructed. Memories are editable. Consciousness is transferable. Trust the process. I reported this in my status update and received a response that unnerved me. The auditory messages are part of the experimental protocol. They are not hallucinations. They are specific frequencies designed to access deep neural processing centers. Continue listening. Frequencies designed to access my brain. That sounded like pseudoscience, but the effects I was experiencing were undeniable. My perception of time had distorted. The 4 hours between reports felt like minutes or days, depending on the moment. That night, I had strange dreams. I dreamed I was in a laboratory connected to machines, while figures in white coats took notes on my behavior. In the dream, I could see my own brain on monitors, with specific areas lighting up in response to stimuli I couldn't identify. I woke at 3 a.m. with the unsettling feeling that someone had been in my room, but I knew that was impossible. I'd locked all the doors. The third day marked a sinister turning point. The patterns on the portal had evolved into something I could barely describe. They were shapes that seemed to move in dimensions that didn't exist, colors with no names, and geometries that hurt to look at. But the most disturbing were the new auditory elements. They were no longer just whispers, but full voices. Multiple voices speaking simultaneously in different languages, some sounding like my own voice. "Do you remember your first day of school?" asked a voice that sounded exactly like me. "Are you sure your mother really loves you?" whispered another. "What if everything you believe about yourself is false?" murmured a third. The voices were designed to sow doubt about my own memories and perception of reality. And they worked. I started questioning basic things. What was the name of my second grade teacher? What had I eaten for breakfast last Tuesday? When was the last time I'd actually spoken to my parents? I reported these effects, and the response was more unsettling than reassuring. Memory fragmentation is a normal phase of the process. Your brain is being prepared to receive new content. Do not resist. Resistance will only cause unnecessary discomfort. Prepared to receive new content. What kind of psychological experiment was this? That night, my computer turned on by itself at 3 a.m. The screen displayed a simple message. Phase 2 initiated. Automatic download in progress. I hadn't clicked anything. The portal was downloading something directly to my computer without my consent. I woke on the 4th day with the feeling that my mind wasn't entirely my own. The fragments of memory I'd been losing seemed to have been replaced with something else. I had memories of places I'd never visited. An underground laboratory with steel walls. A white room where people in coats asked me questions. Sessions where my brain was scanned while I watched patterns similar to those on the portal. But I knew these memories were false. They had to be. I'd never participated in brain experiments before this. Or had I? The portal had changed again. It now showed live video feeds from different locations. At first, I didn't recognize the places, but then I saw something that made me gasp. One of the feeds showed my own house, my room. It showed me sitting at my computer, staring at the portal. There were cameras in my house. I'd been watched throughout the entire experiment. I ran to check every room, searching for hidden cameras. I found none, but that didn't mean they weren't there. Modern cameras can be the size of buttons. When I returned to the computer, there was a new message. "Don't look for the cameras, Lucas. They're unnecessary. We've been monitoring your brain activity directly through the portal's frequencies. Every pattern you've observed, every sound you've heard, has been transmitting data about your neural state back to us." Transmitting data about my brain. How is that possible? The experiment has progressed beyond expectations. You're ready for phase 3, direct content transfer. If you try to disconnect now, the neural effects you've experienced will become permanent. Your only option is to complete the protocol. It was blackmail. They had me trapped. On the 5th day, I didn't get to submit my regular status report. I woke at 11 a.m. with a pounding headache and the strange sensation that I'd lost several hours. My computer was on, displaying a document I didn't remember opening. It was my complete medical history, information I'd never provided during the application. Lucas Martinez, 18 years old. History of minor dissociative episodes during adolescence. Father, industrial engineer. Mother, clinical psychologist specializing in trauma therapy. Address, Belgrano, 2847, Caybe. How had they obtained such specific information? And more importantly, why had I been specifically selected? The answer came in the form of another document that opened automatically. Subject 878. Lucas M., selected for psychological profile, compatible with transfer project. Mother's access to neural trauma research provides genetic advantage. Temporary familial isolation eliminates external interference, transfer project. My psychologist mother, genetic advantage. This wasn't a random academic experiment. I'd been specifically chosen because of my family background and temporary isolation. A new video began playing on the screen. It showed an underground facility I recognized from my false memories. But now I realized they might not be so false. Dr. Weber's voice, which I heard in full audio for the first time, began narrating. The MIND Project is not academic research. It is a program developing consciousness transfer techniques for military and commercial applications. For the past 5 days, we've been mapping your brain's neural architecture and preparing it to receive external consciousness content. Your mind will serve as a receiver for the consciousness of one of our senior researchers dying of brain cancer. Consciousness transfer. Were they going to erase my mind to install someone else's? The process is irreversible and will begin in exactly 2 hours. We recommend you use this time to make any farewells you deem necessary. Panic hit me like a tsunami. I had 2 hours before they tried to erase my mind and install another person's consciousness. My first instinct was to call the police, but when I tried to turn on my phone, it was completely dead. Not just out of battery, dead, as if it had been electromagnetically fried. The house's landline was also out of service. I tried to leave, but the door locks had been tampered with. They wouldn't respond to keys and seemed to have been electronically sealed. I was trapped in my own home. I returned to the computer, desperate to find a way to communicate with the outside world. But all communication apps had been disabled or deleted. Then I remembered something. There was an old computer in the basement that my parents used for storage. If I could access it, I ran to the basement and found the old laptop. It took forever to boot up, but it finally did. And miraculously, it had a separate internet connection through a line they apparently hadn't detected. I immediately searched for information on MIND Project and Dr. Marcus Weber. What I found chilled me to the bone. Dr. Marcus Weber existed, but he wasn't a psychologist. He was a neurosurgeon who had lost his license 3 years earlier for conducting illegal experiments on patients without informed consent. The MIND Project appeared in multiple international criminal investigations as a consciousness trafficking operation, literally hijacking young minds to transfer the consciousness of wealthy, powerful clients paying millions for a second life in a young body. There were reports of at least 50 victims in the past 2 years. All were young people, between 16 and 22 years old. All had disappeared after participating in online psychological experiments. And according to the reports, the consciousness transfer process worked. The young bodies survived, but with the personalities, memories, and consciousnesses of older individuals installed in them. I had to get out of the house before they arrived to complete the process physically. With 1 hour left, according to their schedule, I started desperately searching for ways to escape. The windows were sealed from the outside. They'd clearly been preparing the house for days while I followed their instructions like a fool. But the basement had a small window leading to an outdoor light well. It was narrow, but it might be enough. I grabbed a hammer from Dad's toolbox and started pounding the window frame. The glass shattered easily, but the frame was reinforced with metal bars. I heard cars pulling up outside. Time was up. With desperate strength, I managed to bend one of the bars enough to create an opening. I slid through the window, cutting my arm on the broken glass, and fell into the light well outside. From the well, I could see 2 black vans parked in front of my house. Men in coveralls were unloading medical equipment, stretchers, machines that looked like brain scanners, and something clearly portable surgical gear. They were going to perform the consciousness transfer surgery right in my house. I climbed out of the well and ran to the back street, staying low behind parked cars. I ran to the nearest police station 8 blocks away. I arrived panting, my arm bleeding, shouting about illegal experiments and consciousness transfer. The duty officer initially thought I was high or having a psychotic episode. But when I showed the screenshots I'd managed to take from the basement computer, his attitude changed immediately. "Did you say consciousness transfer?" asked Sergeant Rodriguez after reviewing the images. "There's an ongoing federal investigation into exactly this kind of operation." Within an hour, my house was surrounded by federal agents. But when they entered, they found the house empty. The equipment had been removed, the computers remotely wiped, and there was no evidence anyone had been there. Except for one thing. In my room, they found a small device that had been transmitting radio frequency signals directly to my brain during the 5 days of the experiment. The doctors who examined me after the rescue found evidence of significant neurological tampering. The radio frequency waves had been literally rewriting patterns in my cerebral cortex. "It's technology we've never seen before," explained Dr. Fernandez, the specialist neurologist who evaluated me. "It seems designed to prepare the brain for some kind of external implantation." Implantation of what? Neural patterns, memories, possibly full consciousness. The weeks of therapy that followed were crucial for restoring my normal neural patterns. The false memories I'd acquired during the experiment were gradually identified and separated from my real memories through specialized techniques. But some effects lingered. I occasionally have flashbacks of memories that aren't mine, memories of someone else's life, possibly Dr. Weber himself or one of his clients. My case became the spearhead of a massive international investigation into consciousness trafficking. It turned out the Mind Project was just a small part of a global network that had been hijacking young minds for ultra-wealthy clients seeking eternal life in young bodies. The prices they charged were astronomical. $50 million for a full consciousness transfer. During the investigation, it was discovered that they had successfully completed at least 127 transfers over the past 5 years. 127 young people whose minds had been erased and replaced with the consciousnesses of wealthy elderly individuals. The technology they used combined advanced neuroscience with psychological conditioning techniques that had been secretly developed by military labs and then leaked to the black market. During the investigation, I was put in touch with other young people who had escaped similar operations. Their stories were terrifyingly similar to mine. Maria, 17 years old, had been contacted for a digital creativity study that turned out to be an attempt to transfer the consciousness of a dying famous artist. Carlos, 19 years old, had been recruited for an augmented intelligence experiment that was actually preparation to receive the mind of a scientist who wanted to continue his research in a young body. We had all been selected for specific profiles: high intelligence, temporary social isolation, and family backgrounds that provided some kind of genetic or psychological advantage. It's been 12 months since my escape from the Mind Project. The international investigation led to the arrest of 23 people in 7 countries, including Dr. Weber, who was found operating from a secret clinic in Switzerland. But we know the network was larger. Investigators estimate there were at least 200 successful victims, and the technology continues to be developed and sold on the black market. I've spent the last year in intensive therapy, working to repair the neurological damage they caused. Most of my cognitive functions have recovered, but I still have occasional episodes where I access memories that aren't mine. I've also started working with international organizations to educate young people about these specific deep web dangers. Consciousness transfer isn't science fiction, I tell audiences of college students during prevention talks. It's real technology being used by criminals to literally steal the minds of young people. The deep web isn't just drugs and guns. It's also where some of the world's most sophisticated criminal organizations operate, using technologies we're only beginning to understand. My parents returned from Europe to find their son had been targeted by an international consciousness trafficking operation. The guilt they feel for leaving me alone is something we're all working through in family therapy. The devices found in my house were analyzed by military technology experts. They discovered the neural manipulation technology was 10 years ahead of anything in official government labs. Whoever developed this has massive resources and access to research we didn't even know existed, one of the investigators explained to me. It's possible it was developed by secret government labs and then stolen or sold. The implication was terrifying. If criminals had access to such advanced mind control technology, what else was available on the black market? The most disturbing part of my experience wasn't the false memories or the technological manipulation. It was realizing how many young people had completely lost their identities in these experiments. During the investigation, I met some of the successes, young people whose bodies had survived the consciousness transfer, but now contained the minds of wealthy, elderly individuals. Seeing a 16-year-old girl with the memories, personality, and mannerisms of a 78-year-old man is something I'll never forget. Her family had lost her forever, even though her body was still alive. A year later, there are still unanswered questions that keep me awake at night. How many operations like the Mind Project are still running undetected? How advanced is the consciousness transfer technology, really? Who are the clients paying $50 million for young bodies? And more personally, how much of my own consciousness is still truly mine? The deep web still exists. Sites like the Mind Project continue to operate under different names, and curious young people are contacted every day by operations promising easy money or unique experiences. My story is a specific warning. If you're ever contacted by a psychological experiment or consciousness study offering money to participate from home, walk away immediately. These organizations aren't interested in advancing science. They're interested in stealing your mind, literally. The technology for consciousness transfer exists. The criminals using it are willing to pay millions for access to young minds. And they're constantly developing new ways to contact and manipulate potential victims. I'm writing this exactly 2 years after my escape from the Mind Project. I've spent this time rebuilding my identity, assisting with international criminal investigations, and warning others about these dangers. But I've also been grappling with a question that haunts me. What would have happened if I hadn't escaped? According to the medical experts, the consciousness transfer process would have completely erased my personality, memories, and everything that made me who I am. The body would have survived, but Lucas Martinez would have ceased to exist forever. In its place would have been the consciousness of some wealthy elderly person enjoying a second life in my young body. It's a kind of death that doesn't even have a name. It's not physical murder, but identity murder. Complete erasure of everything a person is. And it's happening right now in secret labs around the world. The deep web isn't just a place where drugs are sold or illegal pornography is traded. It's also where organizations have developed technologies to steal the most fundamental things that make us human: our minds, our memories, our identities. My advice to any young person reading this is simple: stay on the surface. The treasures promised in the depths aren't worth the risk of losing your soul. Because in the digital labyrinth of the deep web, not all exits lead back home. Some lead to labs where your mind can be auctioned to the highest bidder. And once you go deep enough, it might not be you making the decision to leave anymore. Curiosity killed the cat. In the deep web, curiosity can kill the person. Stay safe. Stay on the surface. And never forget that your mind is the only thing that truly belongs to you. Don't sell it. Don't rent it. And definitely don't donate it to experiments by strangers on the internet. Because once it's gone, it's never coming back. My name is Marcos. I'm 24 years old, and this is the story of how one night of curiosity led me to the deepest abyss of humanity. I live alone in a small apartment in the city center, work as a freelance programmer, and spend most of my nights in front of the computer. I've always been a curious guy, the type who dives into obscure forums and reads about conspiracies for fun. But that night, everything changed. There are no ghosts or demons in this story, only the raw reality of what humans are capable of when they think no one is watching. It all started on a Saturday afternoon. I was browsing Reddit on one of those subreddits about internet mysteries when I saw a post about the deep web. The user talked about how to access it using Tor and included links to guides. It wasn't the first time I'd heard of it. I knew it was the hidden part of the internet where drugs, weapons, and worse were sold, but I'd never dared to go in. That night, with a beer in hand and nothing better to do, I decided to try. I downloaded Tor, set up the browser, and entered an onion link directory. At first, it was thrilling. I found black markets with exotic drugs, hacker forums discussing vulnerabilities, and whistleblower sites sharing classified documents. I felt like an explorer in a new, invisible world. But curiosity is a slow poison. After a couple of hours, I started searching for darker things. I found a link to a site called The Hidden Vault, which promised exclusive content not available on the surface web. I entered, and what I saw chilled me to the bone. It was a forum with sections dedicated to all kinds of illegal activities: organ trafficking, hitman services, and worst of all, live streams of torture and abuse. I didn't dive into those sections right away. I told myself I was just looking, that I wouldn't click on anything. But the temptation was strong. The site had a live chat where anonymous users shared links and commented as if they were talking about the weather. Around midnight, a user named Shadow Broker posted a link. Fresh stream. Not for the faint-hearted. Enter if you dare. My heart was racing. I knew I shouldn't, but I clicked. The link took me to a simple page with a black video player and a chat beside it. The video took a while to load, but when it did, I saw a dimly lit room with dirty concrete walls and a chair in the center. Tied to it was a man, about 30 years old, head down, blood dripping from his nose. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his body was trembling. In the chat, messages popped up one after another. Make him suffer more. Use the knife. Pay for special requests. I froze, the beer forgotten on the table. This wasn't a movie. It was real. The man lifted his head and looked directly at the camera, his eyes full of terror. He mumbled something, maybe a plea, but there was no audio. Suddenly, a masked figure entered the frame, holding a bat. They struck the man's knees, and I saw his body convulse in pain. The chat exploded with virtual laughter and clapping emojis. I felt nauseous, but didn't close the window. I wanted to see how far this would go, as if hypnotized. The stream lasted about 15 minutes more. The torturer alternated between blows and shallow cuts with a knife, while the chat donated cryptocurrency for upgrades. In the end, the man was unconscious, and the stream cut off with a message. Next show in 1 hour. Subscribe for more. I closed the browser, trembling. I told myself that was enough, that I'd never go back. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The images replayed in my mind. The blood, the pleading eyes, the chat's indifference. The next day, I tried to forget it all. I went to the gym, hung out with friends, but the deep web was calling me. That night, I went back in. This time, I sought out deeper forums. I found one called Red Room Confessions, where users shared experiences of live streams. I read detailed posts, how to find the best sites, how to avoid scams, even tutorials for setting up double VPNs. One of the most popular threads was about a site called Pain Palace, known for its interactive shows. I went in. The site required a Bitcoin payment for full access, but there was a free preview. I clicked, and the video showed a young woman tied to a bed in a room with red lights. She was naked, with bruises on her arms and tears on her face. 2 masked men surrounded her, touching her as she writhed. The chat was worse than the last one. Explicit requests, bets on how long she'd last, even coordinates for similar shipments. One of the men read a chat message and proceeded to, I don't want to detail it, but it involved graphic sexual violence. The woman screamed, but the audio was muted for free viewers. I paid for full access. I don't know why. Maybe to confirm it was real. With audio, it was worse. Her screams were gut-wrenching, mixed with the men's laughter. It lasted hours. They took turns using everyday objects in twisted ways. The woman begged for her life, mentioning her family, but that only excited the chat more. Donations poured in, each accompanied by a more sadistic request. I watched as her body broke, literally and figuratively. In the end, they left her there, bleeding, and the stream continued with a countdown for the next act. I left the site and vomited in the bathroom. My apartment felt oppressive, the shadows on the walls like witnesses to my depravity. I tried to delete the history, uninstall Tor, but I knew the images were burned into my brain. That night, I dreamed of the woman, her eyes fixed on me through the screen, but the addiction grew. Every night, I went deeper. I found sites like Human Auction, where people were sold live for abuse. I saw an auction. A teenager drugged and tied sold to the highest bidder. The winner controlled the session remotely, dictating tortures via chat. The boy screamed names, maybe his parents, as they burned him with cigarettes and worse. The chat bet on whether he'd survive. Another site, The Labyrinth, was a maze of links leading to increasingly disturbing streams. I started with one about illegal fights, where men killed each other for money. But it escalated. Streams of group rapes, where victims were kidnapped and filmed in real time. I saw one where a couple was forced to perform for the camera under threat of death. Their sobs, the whispered threats, it was all too real. One night, I found The Final Cut, a site for live snuff films. They paid for views, and the artists competed for ratings. I watched one. A hooded person slowly cutting a victim, describing each cut like an anatomy lesson. Blood flowed, organs exposed, and the chat demanded close-ups. The victim lasted hours, their agony prolonged to maximize donations. My life was crumbling. I stopped working, stopped eating. Only the screen existed. I found a forum where users shared how to join as participants. Some paid to control sessions. I tried one. I paid to dictate a simple act, a punch, but it escalated. Soon, I was suggesting worse things, anonymized behind a nickname. The escalation was inevitable. One night, on a site called Abyss Lev, I saw a massive stream. Multiple victims in a warehouse, abused in a chain. The perpetrators, an organized group, read requests aloud. I saw rapes, mutilations, all live. One victim, an older woman, pleaded to the camera, "Someone help me, please." But no one helped. The chat laughed. I realized I was lost. I tried to report it, but to whom? The deep web is anonymous. I shut everything down, but notifications kept coming, invites to private streams. One showed my IP, threatening to expose me if I didn't participate. Now I live in terror. I know there are people out there, real people, doing this, and I was part of it. A voyeur in human hell. There's no escape. The darkness follows me, in every shadow, in every click. My name is Matthias. I'm 20 years old, and this is the story of how a simple mistake on the deep web made me a witness to a conspiracy involving the most powerful people in the country. It's a tale of how academic curiosity can become a death sentence, and how the truth can be more dangerous than any lie. It all began in August of 2023, during my second year studying journalism at the University of Buenos Aires. I was working on my thesis about digital investigative journalism when I decided to explore alternative information sources on the deep web. It wasn't my first time navigating those murky waters. As a journalism student, I'd learned to use Tor and VPNs to access leaked documents and protected sources. I thought I knew the risks and how to protect myself. I was wrong. It was a Wednesday night, around 2 a.m., when I stumbled upon what I initially thought was just another site for leaked government documents. It was called Unofficial National Archive and promised access to classified documents from the past 30 years of Argentine politics. Most of the files seemed legitimate but not particularly revealing. Routine intelligence reports, minor diplomatic correspondence, government budgets. But there was a section called Silence Project that was protected with multiple layers of encryption. My journalistic curiosity kicked in immediately. After 2 hours working with decryption tools I'd learned in class, I managed to access the first level of Silence Project files. What I found changed my life forever. The first document I opened appeared to be a report from a meeting held in March of 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. The participants were identified only by codes, Subject A, Subject B, and so on. But the institutions mentioned were clearly recognizable: major corporations, government ministries, mainstream media outlets. The meeting's topic was National Narrative Management During Health Crisis. At first, I thought it was just another document about handling communications during emergencies. But as I read further, I realized I was looking at something far more sinister. They weren't discussing how to inform the public about the pandemic. They were planning to use the crisis to implement social and economic changes that would normally face public resistance. The health crisis provides ideal cover to accelerate the implementation of the Silence Project without significant public resistance, one section stated. Participating media have confirmed their willingness to limit coverage of contentious issues during the emergency period. Technology companies will cooperate with the suppression of content contradicting official narratives. Emergency funds will be redirected to Silence Project objectives per the attached schedule. There were lists of journalists to be discredited, academics to be silenced, and civil organizations to be neutralized. And at the end of the document, something made my stomach churn. A list of names of people who had interfered with the project in the past, along with notes on what had happened to them. Dr. Roberto Sanchez, car accident March 2019. Journalist Ana Garcia, suicide August 2019. Activist Carlos Mendoza, overdose December 2019. I recognized some of those names. They were people who had been investigating government or corporate corruption, and all had died in circumstances that, at the time, seemed natural or accidental. I spent the next 6 hours downloading and reading every document I could access. Each file was more disturbing than the last. There was correspondence between senior government officials and multinational corporation executives, coordinating policies that would benefit specific companies at the expense of the public interest. Documents detailing how electoral processes had been manipulated, not through direct fraud, but by controlling the information reaching voters. Plans to use manufactured economic crises to consolidate property and resources in the hands of a small elite group. And most sinister of all, detailed records of operations to eliminate people who posed threats to the project. Dr. Roberto Sanchez, whose death was reported as a car accident, had been investigating irregularities in government contracts weeks before his death. The documents showed meetings discussing neutralizing the Sanchez threat and timelines matching the exact date of his accident. Journalist Ana Garcia had been preparing a series of articles on corruption in public works contracts. The files contained intercepted phone calls and emails, followed by plans to induce psychological deterioration, culminating in her apparent suicide. These weren't accidents. They were systematic murders designed to look like natural causes. I was so engrossed in reading that I didn't realize the mistake I'd made until it was too late. At 8 a.m., after spending the entire night reading documents, my computer suddenly froze. The screen went black, then displayed a message that chilled me to the core. Unauthorized access detected. Tracing location. Corrective measures in progress. I immediately disconnected the computer from the internet and powered it off, but I knew it was too late. I'd been connected for hours, giving whoever ran that site enough time to trace my real location despite my precautions. My phone rang 10 minutes later. It was an unknown number. "Matias Herrera," said a calm male voice when I answered. "Who's this?" "Someone who knows you've been reading things you shouldn't. We need to meet. I don't know what you're talking about." "Matias, we know you accessed the unofficial National Archive at 2:03 a.m. from your apartment in Palermo. We know you downloaded 847 classified documents. And we know you're now in grave danger." My blood turned to ice. Not only had they tracked my access, but they knew exactly where I lived. "What do you want?" "To help you survive the next 24 hours. The people responsible for those documents found out about your access 5 minutes ago. They're sending a cleanup team to you within the hour." "Why would you help me?" "Because I'm the one who put those documents there. And because I need a living witness to expose what you've uncovered." The voice instructed me to go immediately to a cafe in Via Crespo, 30 blocks from my apartment. He told me to take only the essentials and to avoid using my car or public transport with a card, cash only. "How will I recognize you?" I asked. "I'll recognize you. Wear a red shirt and sit at the back table." I quickly packed some important documents, cash, my secondary laptop, and left the apartment. While waiting for a taxi, I saw something that confirmed the threat was real. A black car with tinted windows was parked at the end of my block, with someone in the driver's seat watching my building. The ride to the cafe was tense. Every car that followed us seemed suspicious. Every traffic light an opportunity for interception. I arrived at the cafe and sat at the back table as instructed. 20 minutes later, a man about 45 years old approached my table. "Matias?" he asked. "Yes. My name's Fernando. I'm a former intelligence agent, and the documents you read last night are why I no longer work for the government." He sat across from me, constantly glancing at the door. "You put those files on the deep web?" "Yes. For 6 months, I've been leaking information about the Silence Project, trying to find someone with the skills and integrity to help expose it publicly." "And why me?" "Because you're a journalism student. You have the technical know-how to access the information, and you have no connections to any of the compromised organizations." Fernando opened a laptop and showed me a monitoring screen. "This is what's happening at your apartment right now." The image showed 3 men in dark suits forcing open my apartment door. They moved with military precision, clearly professionals. "What are they looking for?" "Evidence of what you downloaded. And if they'd gotten there while you were still there." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. Fernando explained the true nature of the Silence Project while we watched the men ransack my apartment. It started 5 years ago as a collaboration between the government, major corporations, and media outlets to manage public information during crises, he explained. "Manage how?" "By controlling what information reaches the public, suppressing inconvenient investigations, and, when necessary, eliminating people who pose threats." Eliminating. "Matias, in the last 3 years, 23 journalists, activists, and academics investigating topics related to Silence Project members have died, all in apparently natural or accidental deaths, He showed me a list on his laptop. I recognized several names, public figures who had died in circumstances that raised suspicions but never led to serious investigations. How does it work? They have specialized teams, doctors who can induce heart attacks, technicians who can cause car accidents, psychologists who can drive people to suicide, all designed to look natural. And how did you find out? I was part of the intelligence team providing information on targets. It took me too long to realize what that information was being used, for Fernando showed me more documents on his laptop. They were internal communications between project coordinators, discussing specific methods for neutralizing threats. One document detailed how they'd manipulated a journalist into developing a drug addiction, which they then used to discredit him before killing him with an accidental overdose. Another described how they'd used stolen personal information to blackmail a judge investigating corruption before staging his apparent suicide when he refused to cooperate. Why did you decide to expose them? Because they asked me to prepare a report on my own daughter. His voice cracked slightly. Elena is an investigative journalist. She'd started asking questions about some of the accidental deaths. When I saw her name on the list of potential targets, while Fernando told me his story, his laptop pinged with an alert. "Shit," he muttered, looking at the screen. "They found evidence of our contact." "How?" "Your phone. They traced the call I made to you this morning. On the screen, I could see the men in my apartment talking on radios, clearly receiving new instructions. We have to go. Now, where?" "I have a safe place. But first, we need to get all the evidence you downloaded." "It's on my apartment computer." "No, the one in your apartment will be confiscated. Didn't you make backups?" "Yes, I have everything uploaded to a cloud server." "Perfect. Let's go." We left the cafe through the back door, but as we walked to Fernando's car, I noticed we were being followed. A man in a black jacket had been in the cafe when we arrived and was now walking behind us, keeping his distance. "Fernando," I whispered. "I see him. There's another one across the street. What do we do?" "We run." What followed was a chase through the streets of Buenos Aires that made me feel like I was in a movie, except the bullets were real, and the consequences of being caught were far worse than jail. Fernando had experience in intelligence operations and knew escape routes I'd never have considered. We ran through subways, hid in crowds, and used public transport strategically to confuse our pursuers. But they had resources we didn't. Every time we thought we'd lost them, more appeared. It was clear they had access to urban security cameras and tracking systems that allowed them to follow our movements. "How many people do they have working on this?" I asked as we hid in a train station bathroom. "The Silence Project has operatives all over the city. Police, private security agents, even civilians paid to report specific activities. How do we know who to trust? We can't trust anyone." That's when I realized the true scope of what we'd uncovered. It wasn't just a conspiracy among a few corrupt politicians. It was a control network permeating multiple levels of society. After 3 hours of evasion, Fernando took me to an abandoned building in La Boca. It was an old textile factory that had closed years ago, with multiple entrances and exits that made it ideal for hiding. "How do you know this place is safe?" I asked. "Because it's mine. I bought it through shell companies 2 years ago when I started planning this. Inside, he'd set up a basic but functional apartment. Computers, encrypted communication systems, and what looked like enough food and water for several weeks." "How long have you been preparing this?" "Since I realized exposing them would require more than just leaking documents. It would require surviving the response." Fernando activated multiple security systems. Cameras, monitoring all approaches to the building, motion detectors, and something he described as signal inhibitors to prevent anyone from tracking our electronic devices from outside. "Now," he said, pointing to a workstation with multiple monitors, "I need you to download everything you found last night." For the next 6 hours, We worked together to download and organize all the Silence Project documents. What I'd seen the previous night was just the tip of the iceberg. The complete files contained evidence of manipulation of electoral processes through media control and information suppression, systematic murders of journalists, activists, and inconvenient officials, diversion of public funds to private companies controlled by project members, collaboration with criminal organizations for operations the government couldn't conduct directly, illegal experiments on vulnerable populations under the guise of social programs, blackmail and coercion of public figures to ensure cooperation. But the most disturbing was the complete list of future targets. "Matias," Fernando said, pointing to a document on the screen. "Look at this." It was a list of 200 names of people identified as potential threats to social order. It included journalists, academics, activists, but also political figures who apparently weren't fully aligned with the project. Are they going to kill all these people? Not all at once. They do it gradually, over years, so it doesn't look like a pattern. But yes, eventually at the end of the list was a section titled Final Phase Implementation. Timeline 2025 to 2030. It described plans to consolidate complete control over public information, eliminate effective political opposition, and establish what was essentially a corporate, authoritarian state. "Fernando," I said, feeling nauseous, This is the end of democracy." "Yes, and it's going to happen unless we expose this now." Fernando had been preparing a plan to expose the Silence Project for months, but he needed someone with my technical skills to implement it. "The problem," he explained, "is that they control most mainstream media. If we just leak this information to newspapers or TV channels, they'll suppress it or discredit it. So, what do? Simultaneous mass distribution. We upload everything to multiple international platforms at once, in different languages, with copies sent to human rights organizations, foreign governments, and global independent media. And you think that'll work? If we do it right, they'll be too busy putting out fires to silence us before the information goes viral." He showed me a detailed plan he'd developed. 50 different websites, 20 social media platforms, 30 international organizations, and 100 journalists in various countries would receive the information simultaneously. "How much time do we need?" 12 hours to prepare everything. Then we press the button and wait to see if we survive the reaction. We worked all night preparing the mass leak. Fernando handled contacting his international sources, while I prepared the information packages for automated distribution. Each package contained the original Silence Project documents, contextual analysis explaining the significance of each document, cross-verifications with known public events, a timeline showing how the project's activities corresponded with accidental deaths of public figures, predictions about future targets based on the documents. While we worked, Fernando's security systems detected multiple attempts to locate our hideout. Groups of men were systematically searching abandoned buildings in an ever-tightening radius around our last known location. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "Maybe 6 hours before they get here." "Is that enough time?" "It has to be." At 3 a.m., while Fernando verified international connections, I found something in the files that stopped me cold. "Fernando, look at this." It was a recent document dated the previous week titled Final Cleanup Operation. The document described plans to accelerate the elimination of known threats in response to detected security leaks in the system. "They know someone's leaking information," I muttered. "What do you mean?" "Look at the dates. This document is from 5 days ago. They started planning a purge before I accessed the files." Fernando read the document with growing alarm. "Matias, this means they already know about my betrayal. The website I created, it was a trap. A trap. They detected my leaks and set up the site as bait to identify potential allies. You didn't find those files by accident. They led you to them. The realization hit me like a punch. So, this is an operation to identify and eliminate everyone who could help expose the project. As we processed the revelation that we'd fallen into an elaborate trap, Fernando's security systems began detecting external activity. "We have company," he muttered, looking at the security cameras. On the screens, I could see teams of armed men positioning themselves around the building. These weren't just a few. There were at least 20 people in multiple vehicles. "How many exits do we have?" I asked. "3, but they're probably covering all of them already." "So, what do we do?" Fernando closed his laptop and started packing essential equipment into a backpack. "We upload the information now before they catch us." "But didn't you say we needed 12 hours? "I said 12 hours would be ideal, but 3 hours will have to do." Fernando activated an automated system that began uploading the files to multiple servers simultaneously. The process would take about 20 minutes. And during those 20 minutes, we hope our defenses hold. As if on cue, the shooting started. What followed was terrifying, not for the violence itself, but for the professional precision with which it was executed. They didn't come in shooting like desperate criminals. They moved with the coordination of an elite military unit, using smoke grenades, night vision equipment, and tactics clearly refined through multiple similar operations. "How many times have they done this?" I shouted to Fernando as we barricaded ourselves behind reinforced equipment. "Too many," he replied, firing back with a rifle he'd pulled from a hidden cabinet. The most unsettling part was their communication. I could hear their voices coordinating movements with military jargon, but occasionally I caught phrases that sounded more like a cleanup operation than an arrest. "Primary target in Sector 2. Confirm complete evidence elimination. Prepare disposal protocol." They weren't here to arrest us. They were here to kill us and make it look like we'd never existed. The upload system kept running as the siege intensified. 15 minutes left, then 10, then 5. "Fernando?" "They're on the floor below." 2 minutes more. Explosions echoed through the building as they used charges to breach reinforced doors. Each blast brought them closer to capturing us. Then, with 30 seconds left in the upload, Fernando did something that changed everything. "Matias, take this," he said, handing me a USB drive. "It has everything. If I don't make it, get this to my daughter Elena. She'll know what to do." "What are you talking about?" "We're both going to make it. No. Look at the cameras on the screens. I could see they'd completely surrounded our position. There was no escape." "But there's another way out," he continued. "The drainage system connects to the river. You can swim to the port, and someone has to stay to ensure the upload finishes and they don't find the backup servers." The final 30 seconds of the upload were the longest of my life. Each second brought a new explosion, closer than the last. When the screen finally showed "Upload complete," Fernando immediately began activating auto-destruct protocols for all the equipment. "Let's go," he shouted, leading me to a hidden trapdoor in the floor. The trapdoor opened to a maintenance tunnel connecting to the neighborhood's old drainage system. It was narrow, damp, and reeked of decades of urban waste. "Follow the tunnel east. It'll come out in the river near Puerto Madero. From there, you can get to public territory where they can't touch you without evidence." "And you?" "I'm staying to give them something to find. If they think they only caught me, they'll assume you're just a student who stumbled into something by accident." Before I could protest, he pressed a button that closed the trapdoor from above and activated a system that sealed the tunnel behind me. I heard explosions above, gunfire, and then voices shouting orders. Fernando had been captured, but I was free for now. The drainage tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare stretching for kilometers under the city. The water reached my knees, and there were things floating I'd rather not identify. But it was my only escape route. It took 2 hours to reach the river, emerging from a sewer near the port just as the sun began to rise. I was exhausted, soaked, and probably contaminated with half a century of urban waste. but I was alive, and I had the USB drive with all the Silence Project evidence. My first attempts to contact the media were frustrating. The journalists I tried to reach either didn't respond or directed me through bureaucracies clearly designed to block exactly this kind of leak. That's when I remembered Fernando's words about his daughter Elena. Finding Elena Rodriguez was easier than I expected. She was a well-known investigative journalist working for an independent digital outlet. Her articles on government corruption had made her famous among readers who distrusted mainstream media. I contacted her through encrypted channels, identifying myself as someone with information about her father. We agreed to meet in a public place, Plaza San Martin, at noon. Elena was a woman in her mid-30s with the same intense, intelligent look I'd noticed in Fernando. When I told her what had happened to her father, her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "Do you have the evidence?" "All of it." "And has it already been uploaded to the internet?" "Yes, but I don't know if it'll be enough. They control a lot of platforms." Elena smiled for the first time since I'd given her the news about Fernando. "My dad didn't know something about me," she said. "I've been preparing for this for years. I have international contacts he didn't even know about." Over the next 48 hours, Elena coordinated the most massive leak of documents in Argentine history. The Silence Project files were published simultaneously by media in 15 different countries, translated into 8 languages, and independently verified by international human rights organizations. The impact was immediate and devastating. Within 6 hours, 3 government ministers had resigned. Within 12 hours, the CEOs of 4 major corporations had been arrested. Within 24 hours, the Supreme Court had launched investigations that would lead to the prosecution of over 100 officials and businessmen. But the Silence Project's response was swift. The remaining project members didn't go down without a fight. They launched a massive disinformation campaign, trying to discredit the documents as forgeries. They hired bots to flood social media with conspiracy theories, mixing truths about the project with absurd lies, making everything seem less credible. They attacked Elena and me personally, leaking private information and accusing us of being foreign agents. But their most sinister strategy was to accelerate the elimination of potential witnesses. In the week after the publication, 5 people mentioned in the documents as possible sources died in separate accidents. A journalist committed suicide. An academic had a heart attack. A government official died in a robbery gone wrong. It was clear they were eliminating anyone who could confirm or expand on the information we'd revealed. Elena had experience dealing with threats and immediately implemented security protocols developed by investigative journalists in authoritarian regimes. I moved to a safe house with multiple security systems and escape routes. I stopped using my real identity for anything public. I learned counter-surveillance techniques I never thought I'd need as a journalism student. But the constant paranoia was exhausting. Every car that followed me for more than 2 blocks, every person who seemed to be watching me, every call from an unknown number could be the prelude to my elimination. And there was good reason for the paranoia. Elena had hired a former security agent to monitor threats, and he regularly detected surveillance teams tracking our movements. "They can't kill us directly now," Elena explained. "We're too visible publicly. But they'll be waiting for any opportunity to make it look like an accident." It's been 6 months since the Silence Project files were published. The effects have been profound but also incomplete. Over 200 people have been arrested in connection with the conspiracy. The government has fallen, and special elections have been called. Multiple corporations have been intervened, their assets frozen. But we also know that many of the main culprits escaped. They had too many resources and international connections to be fully defeated by a single country's exposure. Fernando was found dead in his cell 3 days after his capture. Officially, it was suicide, but we all know the truth. Elena and I continue to receive regular threats. We've survived 2 assassination attempts disguised as accidents, faulty brakes on Elena's car, and a gas leak in my apartment that could have killed the entire block. What I've learned over these months is that the truth is more resilient than the powerful expect, but also more fragile than idealists want to believe. The information we exposed has changed the country, but it hasn't eliminated the forces that created the Silence Project in the first place. They've been weakened, forced underground, made to be more cautious, but they're still out there. Every few days, Elena receives information about new operations that seem to be continuations of the project under different names. Every few weeks, someone cooperating with the official investigations dies in suspicious circumstances. The control network we uncovered was too vast, too deep, to be completely dismantled by the exposure of a single project. Despite the ongoing dangers, I don't regret accessing that part of the deep web that August night. What I found was horrific, but it was the truth, and the truth, once exposed, has a life of its own. The Silence Project documents have inspired similar investigations in other countries. Journalists worldwide have started looking for local versions of the same conspiracy. International organizations have developed new protocols to detect and expose government corporate information control operations. Most importantly, a generation of young journalists has learned that the greatest dangers don't come from openly authoritarian governments, but from hidden networks operating within seemingly democratic societies. My story is both a warning and an inspiration. It's a warning that curiosity without caution can be deadly. The deep web contains information that powerful people have spent millions to keep secret, and discovering that information automatically makes you a target. But it's also proof that ordinary individuals can expose and defeat conspiracies that seem invincible. The Silence Project existed because it relied on silence. Once that silence was broken, the conspiracy began to collapse. I'm writing this 2 years after that August night that changed my life. Elena and I are still alive, still investigating, still exposing. We've built an international network of journalists and whistleblowers sharing information about operations similar to the Silence Project in other countries. What we uncovered was just a small part of a global phenomenon. In the last 2 years, our work has helped expose similar operations in Brazil, Colombia, Chile, and Mexico. Each country had its own version of economic and political elites collaborating to control information and eliminate threats. But we've also learned that for every conspiracy we expose, 3 more emerge. The forces seeking to consolidate power and eliminate transparency are relentless and adaptable. Fernando died for this cause, but his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The files he leaked have inspired a generation of journalists who understand that real journalism in the 21st century sometimes requires risks previous generations never faced. My advice to other young people who might find themselves in similar situations is simple. If you uncover information that the powerful want to keep secret, don't keep it to yourself. Share it immediately, widely, and with protection. The deep web remains a dangerous place full of information that can change the world. But it's also filled with traps designed to identify and eliminate those seeking that information. If you're going to dive into those depths, do it carefully, do it with backups, and do it with allies. Because the truth alone isn't enough. The truth needs survivors to tell it. And sometimes, surviving means being willing to risk everything for something bigger than yourself. The archive was temporarily lost, but the truth endures. And as long as there are people willing to seek it, expose it, and defend it, the conspiracies of the powerful cannot stay hidden forever. Democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies in silence, and we refuse to stay silent. This story was submitted by Steve under the title "I Need Your Help," and it's about the dark web. The dark web is a place no one wants to go. If you ask anyone about the dark web, they'll all tell you it's a very bad, very dangerous place, somewhere you absolutely shouldn't go. But despite this, everyone is curious about what's out there. I know everyone reading this story has probably thought about exploring the dark web at some point. So, this story is for all of you. Steve is a normal 25-year-old guy who works from home. His job isn't very demanding. They sent him a laptop from the office, and he spends his day working on it. Once he's done, he usually relaxes or takes a walk in the park, then comes home to his family, eats dinner, and goes to bed. The next day, he repeats the same routine. His job isn't very stressful. In about 5 hours, he finishes everything he needs to do, and the rest of the time, he spends browsing the internet. Steve found a very interesting website with a wide variety of topics to explore: education, politics, entertainment, even topics about India. Clicking on a topic opens a page where anonymous people discuss that particular subject. Steve loves this site because he can dive into any topic and chat with strangers. At first, he explored entertainment topics, discussing recent events, and sometimes got into political discussions about what the government was doing right or wrong. He spent 5 or 6 days investing a lot of time on this site, but after a while he started to get bored. It was always the same topics, the same discussions. He decided to explore further, scrolling down the page. After about 10 or 15 minutes of scrolling, he found stranger topics. For example, one about how aliens visit Earth and are real, which he found very intriguing. He spent half an hour or an hour discussing that, fascinated by what was happening in the world. Then he left that topic and kept scrolling. He found another about secrets the government hides, things that don't appear on TV or in newspapers, but seemed like common knowledge in that forum, as if everyone already knew. Steve was shocked, thinking, "There's so much knowledge here, and I had no idea what's going on in the world." He left that topic and kept exploring. Then he saw a very peculiar topic: the dark web. It was something everyone is curious about, wondering what can be found there, what happens in that place. Steve clicked on the topic, and when the page opened, he noticed the discussions were very strange. They weren't like the normal conversations in other topics. People were talking about bitcoins, but not in a usual way, rather about how to transfer them to hidden sites without anyone knowing. Others talked about hacking and even weirder things. Suddenly, someone dropped a link in the forum, and the comments below exploded with gratitude. Thank you, this is amazing." Steve, intrigued by the reaction, didn't hesitate and clicked the link. When he did, his laptop screen turned completely red. The buttons in the top right corner, like the ones to close or minimize, were gone. A small box appeared in the center with a message that read, "If you want to enter, read carefully." There were about 5 rules. You had to be over 18 years old, a warning about graphic content that might not be suitable for mental health, and other similar instructions. Steve checked all the boxes, including the last one, which said, "We put in great effort to keep this site live, and if you abandon this stream halfway, a penalty will be applied. Please don't do it." Without thinking much, Steve checked that box too and pressed enter. Immediately, a live stream started. It was a completely red room, a dark, almost blood-like red. In the center was a chair with a girl tied to it, her hands behind her back, motionless, as if she were unconscious or drugged. On one side, there was a live chat window where people were typing frantically. Steve watched for 5 minutes, and nothing happened. The chat just filled with messages at an incredible speed. The numbers at the top, showing how many people were watching, kept rising. The girl didn't move. Suddenly, a man entered from behind, carrying a bag. He placed the bag on a table next to the girl and pulled out several objects: a hammer, pliers, a knife. Steve started to feel uneasy. The man, who wasn't wearing a mask or anything to identify him, said, "Let's start this stream." The chat exploded, the messages moving too fast to read. Some were donating large amounts of bitcoins, and Steve didn't understand what was happening. The man took a bottle of water and poured it over the girl's face, hitting her with it 2 or 3 times. The girl began to move slowly, opening her eyes, trying to scream but seeming unable, as if she'd been drugged. As she regained consciousness, her screams grew louder, but it was impossible to make out what she was saying. Suddenly, 3 boxes appeared on the screen with options: pliers, knife, razor. Below each, numbers were rapidly increasing. The viewers were voting. Steve, without thinking, clicked on one option. The boxes stayed on the screen for 10 seconds before disappearing, leaving only the razor as the most voted option. The man picked up the razor and approached the girl, who was screaming desperately. Steve felt increasingly uneasy, realizing something was very wrong, but not fully understanding what. Then, the man grabbed the girl's face and, with the razor, deeply cut her eyelid. The screen filled with blood, and the girl screamed in unbearable pain. Steve, horrified, backed away from the laptop, unable to process what he was seeing. He couldn't report it to anyone. He didn't know what to do. He was witnessing a live stream of something atrocious. He tried to close the laptop, but the buttons didn't work, as he'd already noticed. He pressed the escape key hard, but nothing happened. The stream continued, and Steve, in a panic, considered shutting down the laptop completely. Just as he was about to, 3 new options appeared on the screen: hammer, pliers, knife. The chat urged everyone to vote again. The girl kept screaming, and Steve tried everything to close the stream, but nothing worked. The votes ended, and the knife won this time. The man approached slowly, cut the girl's lips with the knife, and the screen filled with blood again. Steve, on the verge of a mental breakdown, shut down the laptop by pressing the power button. The screen went black, and he sat there, trying to comprehend what he'd seen. He'd gone from reading about normal topics like soccer and entertainment to stumbling into something so dark it shattered his mind. He didn't know what to do. He went for a walk in the park, met up with friends, tried to distract himself. When he got home, he ate dinner normally and went to bed, convincing himself it had all been fake, a setup to scare people. The next morning, he had to turn on the laptop for work. After an hour, a notification popped up. The screen turned red again, with a white box in the center that read, "Do you want to enter this stream?" Steve froze. He hadn't clicked any link or even opened the browser. It was the same red screen as before, with no buttons to close or minimize. He tried pressing no, but nothing changed. Automatically, the stream started. It was the same red room, with the same objects on the table, but this time, instead of the girl, there was a boy tied to the chair. His fingers were cut off. His body looked mutilated, as if he'd undergone an autopsy while still alive. Steve, terrified, watched the man pick up a hammer and strike the boy's head several times until he died. Then, the man walked to a board in the room where it was written, "This man abandoned our stream halfway and disappointed us. This is his punishment." Steve realized he'd also abandoned the previous stream. If this was real, he could be the next target. He shut down the laptop immediately, went to the office, and said it had broken. He deliberately damaged the laptop, and the office gave him a small fine but provided a new one. Steve formatted the old laptop before handing it over, thinking that would keep him safe. He believed that without that laptop, there'd be no more links or streams. Though not entirely at ease, he felt the danger had passed. However, that night, when he turned on his new laptop, he received a message that chilled him to the bone. It was a short message: "You're next." Steve didn't understand how it had happened. He realized that by entering the stream without taking precautions like covering his camera or using a VPN, he'd exposed all his personal information to whoever was running that red room. He was terrified. That was the title of his post, but Steve provided no further updates. It's unknown whether this really happened to him, what happened afterward, if he became a target, or if he managed to escape. In the comments on his post, many people expressed concern, suggesting he contact the police or sharing their own experiences. Some offered advice, but there were no more responses from Steve. His last post was about 2 weeks ago, and since then, there's been no activity on his page. I hope Steve is okay. My name is Javier. I'm 25 years old, and this is the story of how a simple curiosity dragged me into the deepest digital hell. I live alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, in a gray, forgotten neighborhood where the streets fill with puddles after every rain and stray dogs bark all night. I work as a freelance graphic designer, creating logos and banners for clients I never meet in person, all through emails and online platforms. My life is solitary, entire days in front of the screen, nights lost in endless scrolling. I've always been a restless guy, the kind who dives into weird forums, reads about conspiracy theories for fun, and wonders what lies beyond the surface of the internet. But that night, an ordinary Thursday in autumn, when the wind whistled against the broken windows of my building, everything changed. There are no supernatural monsters or ghosts in this story, only raw human cruelty exposed in the shadows of the deep web, where anonymity unleashes the worst in us. I remember the exact moment. It was 10 at night, and I was sprawled on the frayed sofa in my living room with a half-eaten cold pizza on the table and a lukewarm can of beer in my hand. The apartment smelled of old cigarette smoke and dampness, that persistent odor that clings to the walls in buildings like this. I was bored, scrolling through Reddit on one of those subreddits about online mysteries like r/deepweb or r/internet mysteries, where people share stories that sound like they're ripped from horror movies, but swear are real. I saw a post titled "The Darkest Games of the Deep Web Dare to Play." The user, an anonymous figure with a Guy Fawkes mask avatar, talked about immersive experiences that went beyond the ordinary, with links to guides for accessing them using Tor. They described how these games weren't just pixels and code, but something that changed you, made you question your own humanity. I knew the basics about the deep web, that hidden part of the internet, accessible only with special software, full of black markets selling synthetic drugs, illegal weapons, stolen data, and worse things I don't even want to mention. I'd read articles in Vice or Wired about red rooms, those supposed live torture streams, but I always thought they were urban myths, exaggerations to scare newbies. The games sounded intriguing, like an escape from my monotonous routine. What harm could looking do? I downloaded Tor from a mirror site, installed it on my old laptop, a Lenovo with a scratched screen and a noisy fan, set up the browser with bridges to bypass censorship, and entered a directory of .onion sites like Hidden Wiki or something similar. The interface was crude, pages with black backgrounds and white text, no flashy images, just raw links. At first, I found harmless, almost disappointing stuff. Discussion forums on cryptography, where geeks debated encryption algorithms like they were poetry. Pirate libraries with thousands of ebooks banned in some countries, from guerrilla manuals to extreme erotic novels. Even an anonymous chess game, where I played a match against an invisible opponent who beat me in 15 moves. I felt like an adventurer in a secret world, my pulse racing with the adrenaline of anonymity. But the boredom returned quickly. I wanted more. I searched for deep web games in the internal forums, and that's when the spiral began. I found a site called Dark Games Hub, a chaotic forum with disorganized threads and users with names like Voidwalker or Blood Pixel. The design was primitive, simple HTML tables, no CSS, like it was frozen in the 90s. There were descriptions of torture simulators, hacked virtual reality games designed to induce nightmares, and challenges where you lost bitcoins if you failed. I thought they were fake, computer-generated graphics, maybe mods of games like The Sims with gory themes. I read entire threads, one about a game called Pain Simulator, where you controlled an avatar that self-harmed with realistic blood and bone physics. Another about Escape Room Eternal, A puzzle where failing meant watching fake snuff videos. But one thread stood out: The Hunt, a game described as the ultimate thrill for the brave. The original post, written by a user named Hunter Master, said, "Enter if you dare." Simple rules: watch, participate, survive. Not for the faint of heart. Link below. It included an onion link and warnings that once you were in, there was no turning back. I clicked, and the site loaded a black page with a registration form. It asked for an anonymous nickname. I chose Shadow Lurker, a disposable email address, and a Bitcoin payment for premium access. I transferred 0.01 Bitcoin from my wallet, thinking it was a harmless scam, that they'd steal my crypto and nothing more. But the payment went through, and I was in. The interface was minimalist: a central video player, a side chat, and a control panel. The screen showed a dark room, lit by a faint, flickering red light, pulsing like a heartbeat. In the center was a metal chair with worn leather straps, stains that looked like dried blood on the cracked concrete floor. No one was there yet. The chat was already active, players typing in English and Spanish, ready for the show. Betting on resistance time, under 30 minutes, 2-to-1 odds. Last time was epic, the guy lasted hours. A counter in the corner read, "Next hunt in 10 minutes. My heart beat faster, a knot in my stomach. What was this? I thought it was role play. Paid actors on an improvised set, maybe in some Eastern European basement. The minutes dragged like hours. I drank another beer to calm my nerves, cold sweat on my forehead despite the cool night. The counter hit 0. The red light intensified, and a masked figure entered the frame, wearing a stained black jumpsuit and a gas mask that distorted their voice into a mechanical growl. They dragged a bound and gagged man, a hood over his head. They sat him in the chair with brute force, the straps creaking as they tightened around his wrists and ankles. They removed the gag and hood. The man, about 40 years old, with a scruffy beard and swollen, terrified eyes, blinked under the light, his pale skin covered in fresh bruises. He begged immediately, "Please let me go. I have a family, 2 young daughters. I don't know what you want, but I'll pay anything." His voice was real, trembling, with an accent that sounded like it was from inland Argentina or maybe Uruguay. It wasn't acting. The terror in his eyes was palpable, veins in his neck pulsing with every word. The masked figure ignored the pleas and turned to the camera. "Welcome to the hunt. Today, our hunter is you. Vote for the initial tool: knife, pliers, or acid. You have 60 seconds. The chat exploded, votes pouring in like an avalanche, crypto bets transferred in real time. I saw messages like knife to start soft, acid to see the skin melt, pliers, let's take something permanent. I chose knife, curious, my finger trembling on the mouse. I still didn't believe it was real. The vote won. The masked figure grabbed a rusty knife from a side table, its serrated blade reflecting the red light. They zoomed the camera for a close-up. The jagged edge, rust stains that looked like old blood. They cut the man's arm superficially, a precise 10-centimeter gash. Real blood welled up, red and thick, dripping to the floor with a wet sound the microphone captured perfectly. The scream was guttural, primal, a howl that froze my blood. The man writhed in the chair, the straps cutting into his skin. This wasn't fake. This was live torture, streamed for an anonymous audience, paying for the privilege. I tried to close the window, my mind screaming to get out, but a pop-up appeared. Exiting now alerts authorities to your IP. Confirm. Panic flooded me. Was it a bluff? Had they traced me, despite Tor? I stayed, hypnotized by the horror, my stomach churning. The chat celebrated, nice cut, deeper next time. Donating 0.05 Bitcoin for a nail pull. The game escalated quickly. Players paid for turns, dictating specific actions through donations. The first requested, cut a finger. The masked figure complied, swapping the knife for rusty pliers. They positioned the camera for a perfect angle. The man's index finger, trembling, nail dirty. They clamped the pliers around the phalanx, twisting slowly. The man screamed, his body convulsing, urine pooling under his pants in a humiliating puddle. The finger came off with a bone-crunching snap, blood splattering the camera lens, blurring the view for a second before it was wiped clean. The chat erupted in laughing emojis and virtual applause. Sinister details assaulted me. The imagined smell, metallic blood mixed with sweat and fear. Close-ups of the open wound, pink flesh exposed, veins pulsing as if trying to escape. The sound of dripping blood, steady like a clock ticking toward the end. Hours passed in that first session. The man held out longer than expected, pleading the names of his daughters. "Sophia and Martina, please let me see them again." Tears mixing with blood on his face. Players laughed with cruel comments. "Say goodbye to your girls. Betty cries for mommy now." I paid for a turn, suggesting boiling water on the foot. Why did I do it? Morbid curiosity, anonymity, erasing my morals. I donated 0.02 Bitcoin, and the masked figure prepared a pot on a portable burner. The water bubbled, steam rising in the humid room. They removed the man's shoe and sock, revealing a calloused foot. They poured the water slowly, the skin reddening, blistering in seconds, bubbles forming like a chemical burn. The scream was deafening, hoarse at the end as his voice gave out. The smell described in the chat by the moderator. Burnt flesh, like a failed barbecue. By dawn, the man was a broken shell, missing fingers, oozing burns, crisscross cuts on his torso. His breathing was shallow, eyes glassy. The masked figure announced the finale. Vote for execution method. Asphyxiation 1. They used a plastic bag, tightening it around his head. I watched the final throes, his chest heaving desperately, condensation fogging the plastic. He died on camera, body limp. The stream cut off with, "Score, 8 out of 10. Next hunt tomorrow. Thanks for participating." I shut the laptop, ran to the bathroom, and vomited, the acid burning my throat. I looked in the mirror, red eyes, pale face. What had I done? But I went back the next night. The addiction took hold like a virus. I lied to myself, just to confirm it's real. One more time, then I stop. I entered the hunt again, paying more for VIP access, which included multiple camera angles and enhanced audio. This time, the victim was a young woman, maybe in her 20s, with tangled long hair and torn clothes. She pleaded in English with a Russian accent. "No, please, I'm a student, I haven't done anything." The game varied. Electric theme. We voted on voltages. It started with mild shocks, her body jerking like a puppet. It escalated to cables on genitals, smoke rising from scorched skin. I paid for electrified needles, watching them inserted into sensitive spots, current flowing. Her screams were high-pitched, breaking into sobs. Days later, I explored deeper levels. Using chat links, I found the Hunt Elite. Multiple victims, themed hunts with elaborate setups. One unforgettable. A kidnapped family, father, mother, teenage son, in a warehouse staged like a bunker. Forced to choose who suffers first, under threat of all being killed. The mother volunteered to save her son, tears streaming. "Take me, let him go." Tortured with electricity, electrodes on nipples, current rising. She convulsed, urine running down her legs, the son watching, traumatized, screaming, "Mom." The father tried to intervene, earning a blow that broke his nose, blood splattering the son. The chat voted for Family United, forcing them to harm each other. The son made to cut his mother's finger with pliers, crying the whole time. The escalation was relentless. I spent whole nights sleepless, my apartment turning into a cave, stacks of empty cans, overflowing ashtrays, the screen my only light. I dropped freelance projects, ignored friends' calls. Only the deep web existed. I found custom games, players commissioning specific kidnappings. I paid for one, simple, anonymized through proxies. I specified, "Young man, alone, looks like me." Days later, a dedicated stream in a private channel. The victim, A guy my age, skinny, with broken glasses, terrified in a similar chair. I dictated tortures via chat, cigarette burns on arms, oozing red circles, cuts on thighs, blood-soaking pants. His screams echoed in my empty room, resonating through my headphones as if I were there. I masturbated once, ashamed, pleasure mixed with guilt, my life completely unraveled. I lost weight, deep dark circles, constant paranoia. I looked out the window, convinced I was being watched. I found the ultimate game, a tournament where players compete torturing assigned victims, the winner choosing the final death. I watched sessions, one with slow decapitations, a handsaw cutting through neck, arterial blood spraying, another with eviscerations, a knife opening the abdomen, intestines spilling out hot and steaming, a fecal smell vividly described by the moderator. The final throes. Gurgling, eyes rolling, bodies twitching post-mortem. One night, after a particularly brutal session, a girl, no older than 10, tortured with fire, her childish screams seared into my mind. I received a private chat message. Good work, Shadow Lurker. Your turn to play in person. Address: a street in Buenos Aires near my neighborhood. Come alone, or we share your logs with the police. Absolute panic. Had they traced me? Despite VPNs and TOR, did they know who I was? I ran to the window, saw shadows in the street. I packed a backpack, fled to a cheap motel, but notifications hit my phone. Photos of me taken from outside my window, recent timestamps. Don't run. The game finds you now, hiding in rundown motels, swapping SIM cards. I know they're coming. The deep web isn't a game, it's human evil, alive and bloody, and I'm part of it. Every night, I hear footsteps in the hallway, imagining masks and knives. There's no escape. The abyss swallowed me. I had always been a restless guy, drawn to the dark corners of the web, hacker forums, conspiracy subreddits, 4chan threads full of disturbing stories. But one Friday night, with the wind banging against the broken blinds of my window, I crossed a line of no return. There are no ghosts or demons in this story, just the raw horror of what humans do when they believe no one is watching. It all started out of boredom. It was 11 at night, and I was sprawled on a worn-out armchair with a lukewarm Quilmes in my hand and a reheated pizza tray on the table. My apartment smelled of damp and burnt wiring, courtesy of my old laptop, a Dell that buzzed like it was about to explode. I was scrolling through Reddit in r/deepweb, a subreddit full of posts about black markets and digital urban legends. An anonymous user with a pixelated eye avatar had posted a thread titled "The Deep Web's Darkest Secrets, Games You Shouldn't Play." It talked about hidden sites accessible only with Tor, where unique experiences were offered to the brave. It included a guide for setting up the browser and a link to a .onion directory. I knew the basics of the deep web: drugs, weapons, stolen data. But the games sounded like a challenge, something to pull me out of the tedium. I downloaded Tor from a mirror, set it up with bridges to avoid blocks, and entered a .onion directory, a raw version of the hidden wiki. The page was chaos: white text on black background, messy links, no images, just URLs that seemed to scream danger. At first, I found almost deceptive things. Cryptography forums where nerds discussed SHA 256 algorithms, pirate libraries with PDFs of guerrilla manuals and illegal pornography, a gambling site where people bet Bitcoin on dogfights. I felt like a tourist in a strange market, my heart racing with the adrenaline of anonymity. But boredom returned, and I looked for something else: deep web games. On a forum called Darknet Playground, with a primitive design that reminded me of GeoCities, users with nicks like Grim Spectre and Viper X shared links to forbidden games. I read about torture simulators with realistic graphics, hacking challenges that promised to dox you if you failed, and something called the Abyss Challenge, a game described as the The ultimate rush for those with no limits. A thread highlighted a link. The Abyss, for the brave only. The post, by a user called ReaperHost, said, "Enter if you have the guts. Rules: observe, interact, survive. Payment in Bitcoin required." The .onion link was underlined in red with a warning. There is no exit once you enter. I clicked, moved by a mix of curiosity and stupidity. The page loaded slowly, a black screen with a form. It asked for a nickname. I chose Night Prowler, a disposable email, and 0.015 Bitcoin for full access. I transferred the amount from a wallet I used for small purchases, thinking it was a scam. The payment confirmed, and the screen changed to a Spartan interface, a video player, a side chat, a control panel. The screen showed a concrete room lit by a red bulb that flickered like a heartbeat. In the center, a metal chair with dirty leather straps, the floor stained with something dark that looked like dried blood. The chat was already alive, ready for the action. I bet 0.05 Bitcoin that he won't last 15 minutes. The last one was pathetic. He fainted quick. A counter read, "Next show in 8 minutes." My breathing sped up, cold sweat dripping down my back. I took a swig of beer, but it tasted metallic. What was this? I thought of a cheap film set. Actors paid for an extreme roleplay. Minutes stretched into hours. The buzz of my laptop amplifying the tension. The counter hit 0. The red light steadied, casting long shadows. A figure entered, wearing a black coverall stained with grime and a gas mask covering his face, the goggles reflecting the light like insect eyes. He dragged in a woman, bound with a burlap sack over her head. He sat her in the chair, the straps creaking as he tightened them. He removed the sack, revealing a woman in her 30s, tangled brown hair, a pale, bruised face. Her bloodshot eyes locked onto the camera. "Please, help me. I don't know where I am. I have a son." Her voice, broken and with a Spanish accent, was real, not acted. The masked man spoke, his voice distorted by the mask. "Welcome to the Abyss. You are the players. First vote, starting tool, hammer, knife, blowtorch, 60 seconds. The chat exploded. Hammer, let's break something. Knife for clean cuts. Blowtorch, burn her. I chose knife, fingers trembling, still convinced it was fake. Blowtorch won. The masked man grabbed a handheld blowtorch, the blue flame hissing. He brought the camera close, the tip of the flame licking the air. He touched the woman's arm, a brief caress. The skin reddened, then bubbled. A sharp scream escaped her throat. The smell, described by the moderator in chat, was burned flesh, like ruined barbecue. The woman writhed, the straps cutting into her skin, blood dripping where the leather dug in. This was not a game. It was live torture streamed for an anonymous audience paying for the spectacle. I tried to close the window, but a pop-up appeared. "Leaving now will log your IP to the authorities." Confirm. My heart raced. Was it a bluff? Had they traced me? I stayed, trapped by panic and a sick curiosity. The chat cheered. More fire. Burn her face. 0.1 Bitcoin to break a finger. The woman begged, mentioning her son, Tomas, 5 years. But that only excited the chat. Let's make him cry for him. The game escalated fast. Players paid for turns with Bitcoin donations. One asked for hammer to the hand. The masked man switched to a hammer, a small mallet with a stained head. The camera focused on the woman's hand, fingers trembling. The blow was dry, the crack of bone resonating like breaking wood. She screamed and fainted. They revived her with a bucket of cold water, her body trembling, hair glued to her face. The chat bet. How long until she breaks? 0.2 Bitcoin for 20 minutes. I paid for a turn, donating 0.03 Bitcoin, and suggested knife to the thigh. I don't know why. Anonymity dehumanized me. The masked man made the cut, a deep gash, blood flowing like a river, soaking her ripped jeans. The scream was inhuman. I covered my ears. Hours passed. The woman was a ruin, shattered hand, oozing burns, deep cuts. Her breathing was rasping, eyes glassy. The masked man announced the end. Vote for execution. Strangulation, bloodletting, total burning. Strangulation 1. He used a rope, tightening it slowly. The camera did a close-up. The woman's face turning purple, tongue protruding, eyes bulging. She died on camera, body limp. The stream cut with score 7.5 out of 10. Next show tomorrow, I vomited in the bathroom, acid burning my throat. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale face, red-rimmed eyes like I had aged 10 years. I told myself I wouldn't go back, that I would erase everything. But I couldn't. The next night, I logged back on, paying for VIP access. Multiple cameras, HD audio. The victim was a young man, maybe my age, tied to a post. The theme was precise cuts. We voted for surgical tools. The masked man used a scalpel, making perfect lines across the chest, blood flowing like paint. I paid for nail extraction. The pliers tore out the nail slowly. The man screamed names. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. The chat laughed. What a wimp. 0.3 Bitcoin to pull another. Days later, my life was a wreck. I stopped working, ignored deadlines, my inbox full of angry emails. My apartment became a dump. Empty cans, crushed butts, curtains shut. I found Abyss Elite with themed sessions. One had a couple forced to torture each other. The woman cut the man's arm with a machete, crying, "Forgive me, love." He broke a finger of hers, sobbing. The chat bet on who would collapse first. Another session. A teenager, drugged, in a glass box. The game was controlled asphyxiation. We voted to reduce oxygen. His nails scratched the glass, blood beneath them, eyes desperate. The escalation continued. I found Abyss Custom, where you paid for personalized kidnappings. I donated 0.5 Bitcoin, specifying young woman, alone. The stream showed a girl, maybe 20, in a basement. I dictated acid burns on the back. The masked man poured liquid. The skin bubbled, her screams echoing in my head. I hated myself, but I kept going. Weeks later, I was broken. I lost weight, dark circles like pits, constant tremors. I found Abyss Final, a tournament where players tortured victims. The winner killed. I saw slow decapitations, saws cutting throats, arterial spray, eviscerations, intestines falling, a fecal stench described by the moderator. One night, a private message. Night Prowler, it's your turn to play live. Address, a street near my home. Midnight, or your logs go to the police panic, had they traced me. I fled to a motel, but I got photos of myself. Me on my couch watching the streams. Now hiding, I hear footsteps. The deep web had me, and I know I'm next.